Okay, first of all, don't read too much into the title of this photo. It's literally just a reference to a Star Trek Next Generation episode. So it's not trying to say anything grand or change anyone's life. It's just like literally a Star Trek reference. But it's kind of a fitting reference because it almost seems like this little tree branch has tiny little arms that are spread out wide. So I don't know, I guess it kind of fits. It's the title I went with. I don't know. You can take it or leave it. What I did here was kind of a return to, or not necessarily return to, but this is just an exercise in the fundamentals, in the basics. I was walking around Theta Pond on the OSU campus, had my camera with me and my macro lens, as I often do, and I saw this tree with these little branches. This was probably, I don't know, late January maybe, early February. I think it was, the very end of January. And so I think it was a warm day, but it's winter's not done yet. So if this tree is thinking about having some leaves sprout, it's going to be sorely mistaken. But I thought it looked cool to have these tiny little branches sticking out, and I thought I would get a picture of it. And so this is the type of picture that seems really simple. You want a picture of these little red buds sticking out of on these little branches, but it's actually a lot more complicated, and it requires a lot of thought. So it doesn't look like much thought or care or preparation went into this. And on some level, that's true. But on another level, this actually demonstrates years worth of photography experience and education. For one, I wanted to get it composed just right. I wanted to pay attention to the light. I wanted to make sure that all the elements in the picture, like the large branch bisecting the frame, but also going between those branches, those two on the right-hand side, I wanted to make sure that was composed just right. I wanted to get the focus just right. Everything about this is intentional. Even the position of the in-focus little red buds, that's like squarely on the rule of thirds. If you've ever heard of the rule of thirds in photography, that is like literally at the intersection of those two, of the vertical third and the horizontal third. And this is the type of photo that years ago I would have taken poorly. I wouldn't have paid attention to light. I wouldn't have thought about the background. I wouldn't have considered the aperture and these fundamental elements of photography. In fact, to be honest, I wouldn't have even been able to get this photo because I wouldn't have known how to take this photo. I probably would have just taken a close-up of the little red buds and called it a day, but I wanted to make a more complete composition here. So once I saw what I wanted to photograph, I wanted to then take some of these other things into account. Where should I stand? Where should I hold my camera? What angle do I want the shot to be at? What about focus? What aperture should I use? I ended up with f11, but it's really hard to nail focus on something this tiny at any aperture, but especially up close. So even though the depth of field is really, really shallow because these little branches are so tiny, f11 is normally would be a large depth of field, but that's not the case when shooting close up. A small aperture still often means a small depth of field because the tolerances are so low. So what I ended up doing was I put my camera in manual focus, which it's always a manual because I use back button focus. And I just sort of rotated the focus ring slowly as I went from close to far. And I figured one of those shots and fired off a whole bunch in rapid succession. I figured one would be in focus. And it is the one that you see here. It worked out really well. And it was actually kind of an example of why, like two things. Number one, the old D750 still got it. That camera is still phenomenal, even to this day. I would put the image sensor quality, like the quality of the image, up against most modern cameras. But the D750 can't even come close to touching mirrorless cameras in terms of features and focus. I think this picture would have been easier to get on a mirrorless camera, but that's okay. You shoot with what you have. And I got this with what I had, and I really like it. I hope you do too.